If you really want to get a handle on India today, you've got to go back. I mean, way, way back. We're about to dive into a story that stretches across 5 entire millennia, from some of the world's first cities to the planet's largest democracy. It's a huge, epic journey, so let's jump right in.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 5,000 years. To give you some perspective, right, when the very first cities were popping up in India, the Great Pyramids over in Egypt, yeah, they were still pretty new. This isn't just a long history. It's one of the most continuous civilizational stories on Earth, stretching all the way from the Bronze Age to our digital age.
Okay, so where do you even start with a story that big? Well, it doesn't begin with a myth or some grand legend. Nope, it starts with something much more real: stone and water. The very foundations of India were laid down in its river valleys by people who were, honestly, some of the most brilliant urban planners of the ancient world. So let's start there with the ancient foundations. And we're not just talking about old ruins here. We're talking about the actual ideas and structures that would go on to define the entire subcontinent, from incredibly sophisticated city planning to some of the most profound philosophical thinking in human history. First up, you have the Indus Valley civilization. And this is the mind-blowing part. They were building these incredibly well-planned cities like Harappa. We're talking grid layouts, sophisticated sanitation systems, while a huge chunk of the world was still figuring things out. Then, around 1500 BCE, things shift. A new era begins, the Vedic Age. This is the period that gives India its foundational texts, the Vedas, which introduce these core concepts like dharma and karma that are still central to Hindu philosophy today. So out of these ancient roots, you start to see the first great empires emerge. This next phase is all about powerful rulers bringing huge parts of the subcontinent together, creating these long periods of stability. And when you have that kind of stability, well, that's when culture and innovation just explode. And here we have 2 empires that are just absolutely pivotal, each shaping India's soul in a totally different way. First, there's the Maurya Empire. Its most famous ruler, Emperor Ashoka, after a really brutal conquest, completely flips the script. He embraces Buddhism and spends his reign spreading its message of peace all across Asia. Then, fast forward a few centuries, and you get the Gupta Empire, which ushers in a true golden age. But this time, it's not so much about spirituality. It's an explosion of science, mathematics, and art. These 2 empires really set the stage for India's dual legacy of deep philosophical thought and brilliant intellectual achievement. And wow, what a golden age. I mean, sure, the arts were flourishing, but the real game changer here was the science and math. You had thinkers like Aryabhata who were doing things that were just incredible for the time, calculating the value of pi with amazing accuracy, and even proposing that the Earth spins on its own axis. These were revolutionary ideas that are totally fundamental to how we see the world today. Okay, so after those great ancient empires, the story takes another turn. Starting around the 12th century, powerful sultanates begin to rise, and after them comes the absolutely spectacular Mughal Empire. This whole era brought this incredible fusion of cultures, creating some of the most stunning art and architecture the world has ever seen. And the absolute pinnacle of this entire era's genius, well, you know what it is: the Taj Mahal. It's so much more than just a beautiful building. It's the physical embodiment of that cultural fusion. You've got Persian, Islamic, and Indian architectural styles all blended together into one monument of just breathtaking beauty. It's the symbol of the Mughal legacy that endures to this day. But you know, history is never just a straight line of progress. That splendor eventually gave way to a real struggle. By the 18th century, the British East India Company's influence was growing and growing, and that eventually led to direct British colonial rule. This kicked off a new, often painful chapter, one defined by a long, hard fight for freedom. This wasn't a quick fight, you know. It was a multi-generational struggle, led by visionaries who had different ideas about how to win that freedom. You had incredible figures like Mahatma Gandhi, who championed nonviolent civil disobedience. But you also had leaders like Subhash Chandra Bose, who argued for a more direct, confrontational path. All these different streams of the freedom movement eventually came together, and after decades of incredible sacrifice, India finally achieved its independence on August 15, 1947. And that brings us right up to the modern era. So the big question is, how does a nation with a past this deep, this ancient, create an identity for today? India's answer was to build something the world had never seen before: the largest democracy on the planet, a truly modern political experiment built on a 5,000-year-old civilizational bedrock.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. Modern India isn't just a country. It's a living, breathing civilization. It is shaped by everything we've talked about: its ancient cities, its philosophical roots, the scientific breakthroughs of its golden ages, the cultural blending of its empires, and that hard-won freedom. Every single layer of this 5,000-year story is still alive in the vibrant, complex, and incredible nation you see today. And that leaves us with one last fascinating thought to chew on. A history this deep and this rich doesn't just sit in a textbook. It actively shapes the present and the future. So the real question is, how will these 5 millennia of culture, innovation, and resilience continue to write the next chapter of India's story?